Welcome to our channel. We hope you enjoy today's video. Enjoy watching.
I had been hiding my true identity as a millionaire SEO expert to live a simple life with my wife, Naomi, until she became pregnant. I was ready to reveal the truth to her, but just as I was about to do so, a notification on her phone caught my attention. It was from her first love, Ben, who was terminally ill. The words on the screen left me frozen. Ben's post was a heartfelt message, accompanied by an ultrasound picture of their unborn child and a photo of them embracing. He expressed his gratitude to Naomi for agreeing to carry his child before he passed away. The $1 million necklace I had hidden for her felt heavy in my pocket. My heart felt cold, and instead of joy, anger began to take over me. With a twisted smile, I commented on the post, wishing the loving family happiness, and left it at that. That night, I proposed a divorce to Naomi, and she broke down in tears, begging me to stay. But before she could even mention Ben's name, it appeared on her screen again. I answered, wanting to hear it directly from him. Ben's voice was calm but dripping with satisfaction. He told me that Naomi was willing to have his child, and I would still be the technical father. His voice was laced with mocking pity. Naomi is your wife, Elias, but she's still the woman who promised to do this for me, he said. I clenched my teeth, but it was Naomi's voice in the background that really destroyed me. She said that I wanted a divorce because I couldn't handle the truth, and that I was being predictable. Ben's laughter floated through the phone, and all I could do was listen as Naomi consoled him. I took a deep breath and sent Naomi a message, telling her that I had prepared the divorce papers and that she should come home to sign them. She called me back, her voice laced with importance, saying that I was trying to scare her with the divorce. She told me that Ben was dying, and she wanted to give his parents something to remember him by. I felt empty as I looked around our home, realizing that it had never truly been mine. Our life together, the 5 years we had built, crumbled in an instant. Without saying another word, I left, dragging my suitcase to the door and leaving my key under the stone by the entrance. I even took a photo for her, but there was no response, no reaction. Naomi was probably by Ben's side, caring for him, dreaming of their future together. She had made her decision, and I had to live with mine. I met Naomi at a gala event years ago. She was there to play the piano, and I was captivated by her elegance and confidence from the moment she stepped onto the stage. For 2 years, I did everything to win her over, but she always kept me at arm's length. Just when I was about to give up, she appeared in my hotel room one rainy night, her face pale and wet. "Do you still want to marry me?" she asked. I could barely contain my happiness. I renounced a life of luxury, broke off a perfectly arranged engagement, and even cut ties with my family to build a life from scratch. I had to give her everything, but she never knew who I truly was. I thought it would be easier if she loved me for who I was. Over the years, we lived a simple life. I worked on construction sites, took odd jobs, and even sold my family's relics when money was scarce. I was willing to do anything for her. But now, her betrayal cut deeper than anything I had ever known. The child growing inside her was not mine, and her cold words left no doubt that she had been waiting for this moment. "The child will be ours," she had said once, her words almost too casual. "You've always wanted a family, don't you, Elias? When I'm gone, you'll be there for us." Those words had been like a slap in the face at the time, but now they were just empty echoes. I had nothing left to give, and she didn't need my love. There was a time when Naomi and I had the chance to start our own family. It was years ago, when she discovered she was pregnant. But instead of joy, she looked at me as if I had crossed a line. Her hand flew towards me, and I felt the slap on my cheek right there in the hospital corridor, in front of everyone. That moment was etched in my mind, a mix of confusion and pain. And then she spoke the words that still haunt me: a child would ruin my life, destroy my body, and I would be nothing more than a wife confined to the house, chained to a life I despise. Her words were cold and empty. I should have listened more closely to what she was saying back then, but love has a way of making us deaf. Eventually, I accepted it, and we went through with the procedure. We terminated the pregnancy, and our unspoken rule became a double income, no kids. that was the lifestyle she said she wanted, but it turned out to be a lie. Naomi didn't want to have children, she just didn't want to carry my child. When I left the key under the stone, I felt like I was burying something more than just a piece of metal. It was like I was saying goodbye, not just to a house, but to an entire life built on lies and broken promises. As I walked towards the car, the warm lights of the porch were still on, and for a moment, I almost expected her to open the door and ask me to come back. But I knew that wouldn't happen. Naomi wasn't the type to backtrack, not even when she was on the edge of the abyss. I got into the car, my hands shaking on the wheel, and drove aimlessly through the city. The lights of the city shone bright, but they seemed cold and indifferent. It was curious how, among so many people, I had never felt more alone. I stopped at a 24-hour diner, one of those places that smells of reheated coffee and crushed dreams. I sat at a table by the window, watching the few people who were there, a man with a laptop and a sleep-deprived look, an elderly couple arguing in hushed tones, and a waiter who kept cleaning the same tables over and over, as if trying to erase something from his mind. I ordered a black coffee, even though I knew I wouldn't drink it. My mind kept replaying Naomi's words. Our son can't wait to call you dad. How could she have reduced me to that, a mere spectator in my own life? It was as if everything I had done for her meant nothing, as if I had been a secondary character in the story she was starring in with Ben. As the coffee cooled in front of me, my phone vibrated in my pocket. For a second, I hoped it was Naomi, but it was an unknown number. I answered out of habit, my voice more tired than I intended. On the other end of the line, a woman introduced herself as a social worker. Mr. Elias, we need to discuss the situation of Mrs. Naomi's child. She has referred your contact as the child's paternal figure. I was silent, feeling a knot in my throat. The words seemed to come from a distant tunnel. Paternal figure. Naomi had mentioned my name in all this. My mind was racing, and anger and confusion mixed together in a bitter cocktail. I agreed to a meeting, even though I still didn't understand how I had reached this point. The next few days were a whirlwind. At the meeting, they explained that Naomi was struggling with a severe chemical dependency since Ben's death. She had neglected the baby to the point where the neighbors alerted the authorities. Seeing the photos of the conditions the child was living in was like receiving a punch to the stomach. The improvised crib, the empty bottles, the diapers piled up in a corner. The child is temporarily under our care, the social worker explained. But what she said next left me speechless. She mentioned that I was the designated adoptive father, although not biological. It was an unexpected twist, as if Naomi was using her last card to tie me back to her chaos. I felt a deep anger, but I couldn't ignore the child's needs. He was innocent, unaware of all this disaster. The social worker looked at me expectantly, waiting for my response, but I was completely blank. Naomi is in a rehabilitation center, she replied, sliding a form towards me. For now, the priority is the child's well-being. We need to know if you're willing to take temporary custody. The words floated in the air like a sentence. On one hand, my instincts screamed at me to run away from this situation. I had spent years sacrificing myself, trying to erase the photos of that small, helpless child in the midst of a chaos he never asked for. I sighed deeply, feeling a crushing weight on my chest. I'll do it, I said finally. The social worker nodded, as if she had expected it, and noted something in her book. Prepare yourself, this won't be easy, she warned. When I finally met the baby, everything changed. He was smaller than I imagined, with huge eyes that looked at me as if they already understood more than they should for his age. He wore a small blue hat, and his cheeks were reddened by the cold. I held him in my arms, feeling a mix of fear and responsibility that I had never experienced before. He's called Benjamin, the social worker said with a faint smile. That name cut through me like a knife, but I didn't say anything. As I held him, I felt something break inside me. It didn't matter whose son he was, this small child depended on me now, and in that moment, I knew I would do everything necessary to give him a better life. As I took him home, I promised myself that this would be a new beginning, not just for him, but for me too. The first night with Benjamin at home was chaotic. Although I had everything I needed, diapers, formula, a new crib, I was still unprepared for the reality of caring for a baby. He cried every hour, and I didn't know what to do. I sang any song that came to mind, songs my mother used to hum when I was a child. Although my voice wasn't great, it seemed to calm him down, and little by little, he stopped crying. Watching him sleep with his small hand grasping my finger made me feel a connection I didn't expect. It was as if, in the midst of all this chaos, he was the only pure thing, a reminder that there was still something good to fight for. The days turned into weeks, and with time, Benjamin and I found a routine. However, I wasn't alone in this battle. My new partner, Camila, had been a rock throughout the process. Camila was everything Naomi never was, patient, compassionate, and above all, present. She helped me with Benjamin as if he were her own, and seeing him in her arms made me feel something I couldn't describe, a mix of peace and gratitude. "He's lucky to have you," I told her one night as she rocked him to sleep. She smiled with that warm smile that always managed to melt any stress. "No, Elias, we're the lucky ones to have him," she replied. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't facing this alone. The routine with Benjamin began to feel like a new normality, but not everything was resolved. Naomi's family reappeared, and with them, a heap of tensions I thought I had left behind. Her mother, a woman with a sharp gaze and an even sharper tongue, appeared at my door one afternoon, demanding explanations. "Elias, we want to see Benjamin. He's our grandson, and Naomi never should have put him on you as a burden," she said, crossing her arms as if expecting me to apologize. I looked at her firmly, without losing my calm, but with my heart pounding. "He's not a burden," I replied firmly. "He's my son now. If you want to see him, it will be on my terms, and only if it doesn't disrupt his stability." The conversation was tense, but in the end, they agreed to supervised visits, understanding that their daughter was not in a condition to care for the child. The process of earning their respect wasn't easy. Each visit seemed like a veiled interrogation, and every time they lifted Benjamin in their arms, I felt a mix of discomfort and distrust. However, with time, their attitudes began to change. Camila played a crucial role in this, always knowing what to say and how to handle the most delicate situations, showing a patience I was still learning. One day, while we were having coffee with Naomi's parents, her mother broke the silence with a softer voice than usual. "Thank you for taking care of him. I didn't think you'd be capable," she admitted. Although it wasn't exactly an apology, it was the closest thing I had heard from her. In that moment, I knew I was starting to win a bigger battle than I had imagined, proving that I could give Benjamin a home full of love, something he deserved more than anyone. Life began to stabilize, but one day, I received a call that made me feel like the ground had been pulled from under my feet. It was the social worker, informing me that Naomi had left the rehabilitation center before completing her treatment. My mind was filled with questions and fears. What was she going to do now? Would she try to get Benjamin back? Although they assured me that his custody was still firm with me, the possibility of Naomi returning to our lives deeply unsettled me. That same night, as I fed Benjamin, I couldn't help but feel a mix of anger and sadness. How could she be so irresponsible? But every time I looked at him, I remembered why I had decided to fight. "I won't let anything or anyone hurt you," I whispered to him as he watched me with his big eyes. A week later, Naomi appeared out of the blue, like a thunderstorm on a clear day. She knocked on my door, and when I opened it, I barely recognized her. She was thinner, with sunken cheeks and disheveled hair, but her eyes still sparkled with the same defiant glint they always had. "Elias, I need to talk to you," she said, and although my instinct was to slam the door shut, I let her in. She sat in the living room, taking in every detail as if trying to memorize it. "I've made many mistakes," she began, her voice trembling with regret and wounded pride. "I want to see my son," she said, and her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Naomi, you lost that right when you abandoned him," I replied, trying to keep my cool. But then she broke down in tears, and for the first time, I didn't see the cold, calculating woman I knew, but someone broken, someone who might be trying to make amends. Naomi sobbed uncontrollably, and although every fiber of my being wanted to stay firm, something in her vulnerability disarmed me. "It's not as easy as you think, Elias," she said between sobs, clinging to the couch cushion as if her life depended on it. I've lost everything, and I'm not asking you to give Benjamin back to me. I just want to see him, even if it's from afar. I need to know he's okay. Her voice was a fragile thread, and for a moment, I doubted myself. Was this the same woman who had treated me like a pawn in her game? Something in her tone seemed different, but the wounds she had inflicted still lingered. Benjamin is fine because I made sure of it, I said, sitting down across from her. But before I could say anything more, Camila appeared with Benjamin in her arms. The tension in the room became palpable. Naomi froze, her eyes fixed on the child as if she were seeing a mirage. She began, but her voice cracked. Benjamin, oblivious to the weight of the moment, reached out to her, babbling something incomprehensible. Camila looked at me for approval, and after a brief moment, I nodded slowly. Camila approached and placed Benjamin in Naomi's arms. The scene was so surreal that I could barely breathe. Naomi held him with a mix of fear and adoration, as if she were holding something fragile and sacred. "Hello, my little one," she whispered, and for an instant, I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't seen in years, genuine love. Naomi cradled Benjamin as if time had stood still, stroking his hair with trembling fingers. I could see her tears falling silently, mingling with the child's innocent laughter. Camila, ever observant, took my hand gently, as if reminding me that this wasn't just my battle, but also a necessary step for Benjamin's emotional stability in the future. "He's beautiful," Naomi murmured, breaking the silence, and her words, although sincere, made me feel a pang in my chest. How could she say that after everything she had put him through? But for now, I decided not to respond, letting that small moment of calm exist. After a while, Naomi looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. "Thank you, Elias," she said, and although I didn't expect it, those words carried a weight that seemed genuine. "I don't deserve it, but thank you for taking care of him the way you have." I didn't know what to say. For years, I had waited to hear something like that from her, an admission that she had failed. But now that she finally did, I didn't feel relief, but a strange mix of resentment and sadness. "This isn't for you, Naomi," I replied finally, pointing to Benjamin. "It's for him. If you want to be in his life, you'll have to prove to me that you've really changed, not with words, but with actions." Naomi nodded, and although her face showed gratitude, there was also a glimmer of determination. "I'll do it, Elias. This time, I won't fail." I didn't know if I could believe her, but part of me wanted to give her one last chance, not for her sake, but for Benjamin's. Before she left, she was allowed one last hug with the child, who looked at her with the same curiosity as always. As I closed the door behind her, I felt a weight in my chest, but also a faint sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this story could still have an ending where everyone could find some peace. The weeks passed after that visit, and Naomi began to fulfill her promise. She completed her rehabilitation at a center recommended by the social worker, and although she still kept her distance from our lives, she started showing signs that she was really changing. During that time, Benjamin grew and became the center of our family. Camila and I moved forward with our lives, raising our 3 children as a solid unit. Every day, I saw Benjamin flourish, surrounded by love and stability, something I had sworn to give him from the very beginning. One afternoon, as we were playing in the park, my phone rang. It was Naomi. But this time, her voice was different. "Elias, I've got a job and I'm starting over," she said. "I wanted to thank you for giving me that last chance, even though I didn't deserve it." Her tone had no hint of manipulation, only sincerity. "I want to see you, not Benjamin, just you. I want to close this chapter properly." I hesitated for a moment, but agreed, feeling that it was something we both needed to move forward. We met at a small cafe on the outskirts of town, far from any place we had shared in the past. Naomi looked healthier, with a sparkle in her eyes that I hadn't seen in years. We talked about many things, her recovery, her plans for the future, and how grateful she was for what I had done for Benjamin. For the first time, there were no recriminations or resentments, just 2 people accepting the consequences of their decisions. Before we parted ways, Naomi looked at me and said, "I know Benjamin is in the best place possible, but if he ever needs to know who I was, I'll be ready to tell him the truth." I nodded, knowing that moment would come someday. With time, our lives stabilized. Benjamin grew up surrounded by love, and although Camila and I never hid the truth from him, we always made sure he knew how special he was to us. Naomi, on her part, continued rebuilding her life, and although she never became a constant presence, she kept her promise to be available when he was ready to know his story. In the end, there were no winners or losers, just people trying to do their best with the cards life had dealt them.